The first alien ship appeared over Seoul on a Tuesday morning, casting shadows across the bustling city streets. Kim Dae was mixing chemicals in his university laboratory when the emergency sirens began wailing. Through his window, he could see the massive vessel hovering silently above the Han River, its surface smooth and white like polished bone. Within hours, similar ships materialized over every major city on Earth. The aliens called themselves a Galactic Council, and they had come with what they claimed was good news. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They would be welcomed into a vast community of civilized species that spanned thousands of worlds. But there was a condition. Park Hannah was tending to her family's traditional restaurant when the peacekeepers arrived. The alien creatures moved like walking jellyfish, their translucent bodies pulsing with soft blue and green lights that somehow conveyed meaning. They carried devices that translated their bioluminescent language into human speech. "Your cooking methods are forbidden," the lead peacekeeper announced, its voice emerging from a small metal box. All combustion-based technology must be surrendered immediately. Hannah stared at the gas burners that had fed her family's customers for 3 generations. "But how will we cook?" The aliens produced a strange, flat panel that glowed with warm light. This biothermal surface provides clean, safe heat. No dangerous flames required. Across the city, the same scene played out in countless homes and businesses. Lee Tae watched helplessly as peacekeepers sealed his car's engine with some kind of hardening foam. Yoon Jae's grandmother wept as they dismantled her traditional Ondal heating system, the warm floor that had kept her family comfortable through harsh winters. The aliens explained their reasoning with patient condescension. Fire, they said, was a galactic menace. Too many species had destroyed themselves with uncontrolled combustion. Wars fought with burning weapons. Cities consumed by industrial accidents. Entire worlds rendered uninhabitable by the reckless use of flame. The Krextai burned their atmosphere away with fusion experiments. One peacekeeper told a gathered crowd. The Mordun poisoned their oceans with chemical fires. The Velthara simply forgot to turn off a star forge and incinerated their entire solar system. Humanity would be saved from such a fate through the Flame Accord, a galaxy-wide treaty that banned all forms of controlled burning. No matches, no lighters, no campfires, no engines that relied on combustion. In return, the aliens would provide superior alternatives that were completely safe. At first, many humans resisted. Protesters gathered in city squares, holding forbidden candles and lighter flames high above their heads. But the alien technology was seductive in its convenience. The bio-lights never flickered or went out. The gravity-pulse vehicles never needed fuel. The quantum cooking surfaces heated food perfectly every time, without risk of burns or accidents. Kim Dae found himself working in a laboratory that glowed with soft, steady light from wall-mounted fungal panels. His new equipment operated on principles he barely understood, manipulating matter at the quantum level without generating heat or flame. It was undeniably more advanced than anything humans had built, but something felt wrong. The bio-lights cast everything in cool, clinical tones that made his skin look pale and lifeless. The quantum heaters warmed his coffee to exactly the right temperature, but somehow failed to make it taste right. His colleagues moved more slowly, spoke more quietly, seemed less inclined to ask difficult questions or propose bold experiments. "Perhaps this is simply maturity," his department head suggested when Day raised concerns. "We were like children playing with fire. Now we can focus on more civilized pursuits." The changes were subtle but pervasive. Street festivals became quieter affairs without the crackling energy of bonfire celebrations. Restaurants served perfectly prepared meals that somehow lacked the smoky flavors that had made Korean barbecue famous. Even the night sky seemed dimmer, though the aliens assured everyone this was merely an optical illusion caused by their improved lighting systems. Park Hannah noticed that her customers complained less, but also smiled less. They ate their meals in polite silence and left without the animated conversations that had once filled her dining room with warmth and laughter. The alien cooking surface heated her ingredients perfectly, but the food somehow tasted flat and lifeless. "We have lost something important," she confided to her husband one evening as they closed the restaurant. "I cannot name it, but it is gone." Her husband nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing, but found it difficult to put the feeling into words. The alien translators could convey information perfectly, but they seemed incapable of expressing the intangible qualities that made life meaningful. As months passed, most humans adapted to their new reality. Children grew up never knowing the hypnotic dance of flame or the satisfaction of building a fire from scratch. The old ways became history lessons about humanity's dangerous and primitive past. But in basements and hidden rooms, a few people kept small flames burning in secret. They told themselves they were preserving cultural heritage, but deep down they knew they were guarding something far more precious: the spark of creativity and rebellion that had always defined the human spirit. The aliens had saved humanity from the dangers of fire, but in doing so, they had extinguished something equally vital. The question was whether anyone would remember what they had lost before it was too late to reclaim it. 50 years had passed since the Flame Accord took effect, and Dr. Choi Min had never seen real fire. Born into a world of alien biolights and quantum heaters, she knew flame only from old videos that the Galactic Council allowed humans to study for historical purposes. Working late in her laboratory at Seoul National University, Min stared at the data flowing across her holographic display. For months, she had been analyzing the bioluminescent panels that provided light throughout human settlements. What she discovered made her stomach turn cold. The alien lighting systems did more than just illuminate rooms. Hidden within their gentle glow were microscopic organisms that released chemicals into the air. These chemicals enter human lungs and slowly alter brain chemistry, making people more agreeable and less likely to question authority. The effect was so gradual that no one noticed it happening. Min checked her calculations again, hoping she had made an error, but the data was clear. Humans living under alien lighting for extended periods showed reduced creativity, decreased problem-solving abilities, and significantly less rebellious behavior. The Council had not just banned fire to keep humans safe. They had replaced it with a control system. A soft knock at her laboratory door interrupted her thoughts. Min quickly closed her files and activated her official research display, which showed harmless studies on energy conversion. Dr. Choi? The voice belonged to Yoon Jae, a maintenance worker she had seen around the building but never spoken to. He was a quiet man in his 40s who fixed broken equipment and cleaned the laboratories after hours. "The building is closed," Min said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You should not be here this late." "Neither should you," Yoon Jae replied with a slight smile. "But I think you have been asking the right questions. May I come in?" Something in his tone made Min hesitate. She had been careful with her secret research, but perhaps not careful enough. If the Council had discovered her work, they would send peacekeepers, not a maintenance worker. Still, she felt nervous as she opened the door. "I have been watching you," Yoon Jae said as he entered the laboratory. "You stay late. You ask strange questions about the lighting systems, and you look unhappy in ways that most humans have forgotten how to feel." Min studied his face in the alien biolight. There was something different about his eyes, a sharpness that seemed uncommon in their generation. "What do you want?" "To show you something that your research suggests might interest you." He moved toward the door. "But you will need to trust me and follow without asking questions until we arrive." Every instinct told Min to refuse. She barely knew this man, and what she had discovered about the alien control systems made her suspicious of everyone. But her research had left her feeling isolated and desperate. If someone else had noticed the same problems, perhaps she was not as alone as she thought. They walked through empty corridors and down stairways that Min had never explored. The university building was old, constructed before the aliens arrived, and it had basements and storage areas that were no longer used. Yoon Jae led her through a maze of forgotten rooms until they reached a heavy door marked with warnings about electrical hazards. Behind the door was a space that took Min's breath away. A dozen people sat in a circle around something she had never seen in person, but recognized instantly from historical videos. A small flame danced in a metal bowl, fed by some kind of chemical mixture that produced real fire. The people around the flame looked different from other humans Min knew. Their eyes were brighter, their postures more alert. They spoke in animated voices and gestured with enthusiasm that seemed unusual for their generation. Most surprisingly, They appeared to be thinking and questioning in ways that the biochemical lighting was supposed to prevent. "Welcome to Prometheus Guild," said an elderly woman named Park Sunday. "We have been keeping the old knowledge alive while waiting for people like you to remember what we have lost." Men learned that the guild had existed for decades, hidden in basements and abandoned buildings throughout the city. They maintained small fires using carefully mixed chemicals that produced minimal smoke and heat signatures. More importantly, they had been studying the effects of alien technology on human behavior. "The biolights are not the only control system," explained Lee Hai, a former biochemist who had joined the guild after noticing changes in her own thinking. "The food processing systems add mood-stabilizing compounds. The air filtration units release hormones that reduce aggressive behavior. Even the quantum heating panels emit frequencies that promote docility." The guild members had discovered that exposure to real flame seemed to counteract some of these effects. Sitting around their hidden fires, they found their minds becoming sharper and their spirits more rebellious. They began to remember human emotions and desires that had been slowly suppressed over the decades. "We are not just preserving fire," Yoon-jae explained to Min. "We are preserving the human spirit that fire represents. The drive to create, to question, to rebel against forces that try to control us." Min stared into the dancing flame, feeling something awaken in her mind that had been sleeping for years. The warm light seemed to burn away a fog she had not realized was clouding her thoughts. For the first time in her adult life, she felt truly awake and alive. "What do we do now?" she asked. Park Sun smiled. "Now we teach you everything we know, and you teach us what your research has discovered. Together, we find a way to free our people from this beautiful prison the aliens have built around us." The hidden research station floated in the darkness between Mars and Jupiter, disguised as a broken asteroid mining platform. Inside its shielded walls, men worked by the light of carefully contained flames while her new colleagues gathered around holographic displays, showing data that would shape the foundations of galactic civilization. 3 months had passed since the Prometheus Guild helped men escape Sol after Council peacekeepers discovered her research. Now she stood in a laboratory that would have been impossible under alien oversight, surrounded by equipment powered by controlled combustion and staffed by the brightest rebels humanity had produced. "Look at these star charts," said C.O. Jean, projecting a 3-dimensional map of Council space above the central table. The former aerospace engineer had spent years secretly studying alien navigation data. Every single Council species comes from dying solar systems. Min examined the display, noting the dim red and brown dwarf stars that barely provide enough energy to sustain life. Their home worlds must be cold and dark places. "Exactly," added Park Woo, a nuclear physicist who had joined the rebellion after discovering flaws in alien energy theories. But here's the interesting part. Look at the archaeological evidence from their worlds. New images appear in the hologram, showing ancient ruins and technological artifacts that seem far more advanced than anything the current Council species possessed. Massive structures that could only have been built with enormous amounts of energy. Spacecraft designed for speeds that required stellar-level power sources. "These are not their inventions," Parkwood continued. "The Council species are living in the ruins of civilizations that came before them. Everything they claim to have developed was actually built by earlier races that understood stellar engineering." Min felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking together in her mind. "So they're not actually advanced. They're scavengers." "Sophisticated scavengers," C.O. Jean corrected. "They've learned to maintain and operate the technology, but they don't truly understand how it works. And they certainly don't know how to create new stellar energy sources." The implications were staggering. The Galactic Council presented itself as a collection of highly evolved species that had transcended the need for dangerous technologies like fire. But in reality, they were refugees from dead civilizations, desperately trying to preserve what little energy remained in their dying star systems. That's why they fear fire, Min realized. It's not because combustion is dangerous. It's because they've forgotten how to create controlled fusion reactions. They're terrified that younger species might rediscover stellar engineering and realize how weak the Council really is. Parkwood nodded grimly. The Flame Accord isn't about protecting the galaxy from dangerous technology. It's about protecting the Council's monopoly on power. They suppress any species that might develop fusion technology, because fusion is the key to creating artificial stars. Min pulled up her own research on the biochemical control systems, and they use neurochemical suppression to keep subject species from getting curious about alternatives. It's a perfect system of control, disguised as benevolent protection. The three scientists spent the next several hours reviewing data that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The Council maintained power not through superior knowledge, but through enforced ignorance. They had turned the galaxy into a collection of dependent client species, all carefully prevented from advancing beyond a certain technological level. What if we prove them wrong? Min asked quietly. What if we show the galaxy that fire isn't just safe, but essential? That controlled fusion is the foundation of all stellar phenomena. Co. Jin's eyes widened as she understood what Min was suggesting. Artificial star creation, stellar synthesis. The technology exists, Parkwood added excitedly. The theoretical foundations are solid. We understand nuclear fusion, plasma containment, magnetic field manipulation. The only reason humans never developed stellar engineering is because the aliens stopped us before we got far enough. Min moved to the observation window and stared out at the distant sun, an ordinary yellow star that had been burning steadily for billions of years. What if humans could build their own stars? Not just small fusion reactors, but actual stellar bodies that could provide light and energy to entire solar systems? The Council won't just try to stop us, Co. Jin warned. If we succeed in creating artificial stars, it will prove that their entire authority is based on lies. They'll mobilize everything they have to destroy us. Then we need to work fast, Min replied, and we need to make sure the entire galaxy is watching when we light our first star. Park will begin pulling up fusion equations and plasma dynamics models. I've been thinking about this for years. The key is magnetic containment on a stellar scale. If we can create a stable magnetic field large enough to contain a fusion reaction the size of a small star, we'll need massive energy inputs to initiate the process, Co. Jin interrupted. More power than any conventional reactor can provide. Min smiled, feeling the kind of creative excitement she had never experienced under alien supervision. The flame-lit laboratory seemed to spark with possibilities that the sterile biolights of Council facilities could never inspire. That's where human ingenuity comes in, she said. We don't need conventional reactors. We need something the Council has never seen before. Something that proves fire isn't humanity's weakness, but our greatest strength. As the three rebels began sketching plans for humanity's first stellar forge, they knew they were embarking on a project that would either liberate the galaxy or get them all killed. But for the first time in 50 years, humans were reaching for the stars again. The first artificial star ignited in the shadow of the asteroid series, casting light that had never existed before in the solar system. Min watched through the reinforced viewing port of her command ship as the stellar forge completed its work, creating a miniature sun no larger than a city block that burned with a pure fire-controlled nuclear fusion. Stellar ignition successful, reported Young-ho from the engineering station, his voice filled with wonder. Core temperature holding steady at 15 million degrees. Magnetic containment field stable. We did it, Dr. Choi. We actually built a star. Around Min, the bridge crew stared in amazement at their creation. The artificial star pulsed with brilliant white light, its surface dancing with solar flares that painted the surrounding asteroids in colors of gold and orange. It was beautiful and terrifying, a testament to what humans could accomplish when they remembered how to reach for the impossible. But their celebration was cut short by an urgent alert from the sensor station. Council fleet detected, announced Lehigh, her fingers flying across the control panel. 200 ships approaching from the outer system. They're moving fast, and their weapons are charged. Men had expected this response. For months, the Prometheus Guild had been building stellar forges throughout the asteroid belt, preparing for the moment when they would announce their breakthrough to the galaxy. The Council could not allow such technology to exist, as it proved their entire authority was built on lies and suppressed knowledge. Open all communication channels, Min ordered, activating the powerful transmitters that would broadcast their message across known space. This is Dr. Choi Min of the Prometheus Guild, speaking from the first human stellar forge. We are demonstrating humanity's right to stellar synthesis, the controlled creation of artificial stars. Any species wishing to reclaim their suppressed technologies should observe and learn. The response came not just from the approaching Council fleet, but from across the galaxy, on distant worlds. Aliens who lived under Council rule for thousands of years suddenly felt something awaken in their minds. The crystalline Kethran, who had been forced to use only biocomputers, began remembering how to grow living crystal networks that could process information faster than any organic system. The gas-dwelling Temari rediscovered their ancestors' ability to manipulate planetary atmospheres and create floating cities in the clouds of giant worlds. Most remarkably, the Zorthak began to remember stellar engineering techniques that their species had developed millions of years ago, before the Council's predecessors had convinced them such knowledge was too dangerous to preserve. Council peacekeepers, men broadcast as the enemy fleet closed the weapon's range. Witness what your forbidden fire can become when properly understood. We offer knowledge, not destruction. We offer light, not darkness. The lead Council ship responded with a barrage of energy weapons, brilliant beams that could destroy entire cities. But the stellar forge are protected by magnetic fields that could contain the heart of a star, and the alien weapons seemed pitiful against such forces. The energy blasts were absorbed and redirected harmlessly into space. Min's fleet did not return fire. Instead, they activated more stellar forges throughout the asteroid belt. One by one, new artificial stars blazed alive, transforming the cold darkness between Mars and Jupiter into a constellation of human-made suns. Each new star sent waves of solar wind and electromagnetic energy racing through the solar system, demonstrating the awesome power that the Council had tried to keep hidden. Look at what you have forgotten. Min continued her broadcast, knowing that billions of beings across the galaxy were watching. Your ancestors built wonders powered by stellar fire. They created energy networks that spanned multiple star systems. They turned barren worlds into gardens of life, using controlled fusion that you now call too dangerous to possess. The Council fleet found itself surrounded by artificial stars, each one burning with the fierce joy of successful rebellion. Their weapons were useless against such concentrated power, and their ships began to retreat to a safer distance. But something unexpected happened. From the outer edges of the solar system came new ships, vessels belonging to species that had been under Council control for millennia. The Kethran crystalline ships sparkled with newly activated living computer networks. The Temari atmospheric processors rolled clouds of controlled gas that swirled in impossible patterns. The Zorthak arrived in massive engineering platforms that hummed with barely contained stellar energy. Dr. Choi, came a transmission from the Kethran flagship. Our people remember now. We thank humanity for showing us that the old ways are not lost, only hidden. Similar messages arrived from dozens of species. The artificial stars had done more than demonstrate human achievement. They had triggered a galaxy-wide awakening, reminding entire civilizations of technologies and capabilities they had been convinced to abandon in the name of safety. The Council fleet hung motionless in space, surrounded by the very species they had controlled for so long. Their peacekeepers had never faced united resistance on this scale, and their weapons were designed to intimidate individual planets, not fight against multiple star systems working together. Council representatives, Min broadcast one final message. You have ruled through fear and ignorance for long enough. The age of artificial scarcity is over. The age of stellar abundance begins now. Join us in rebuilding what was lost, or step aside and let others remember how to reach for the stars. As more artificial suns ignited across the solar system, their light carried a message that would reshape galactic civilization. The most dangerous knowledge was often the most necessary, and the species brave enough to master fire would always find ways to create light in the darkness. The Council's capital world had spent 1,000 years in perpetual twilight, orbiting a dying red dwarf star that barely provided enough energy to sustain life. Now its sky blazed with golden light, as Min's most ambitious stellar forge worked to reignite the ancient sun that had once burned bright above this world. Standing on the bridge of her flagship in high orbit, Min watched readouts that showed the star's core temperature climbing steadily. Nuclear fusion reactions that had nearly died out were roaring back to life, transforming the dim red ember into a brilliant yellow star that would burn steadily for another billion years. Stellar reignition at 80% completion, reported Jung-ho from the engineering console. Solar output increasing to optimal levels. The planet's climate should stabilize within 6 months. On the surface below, billions of council beings were experiencing something their species had not seen in countless generations. Windows that had been shuttered against the cold were thrown open to welcome warm sunlight. Ice caps that had covered entire continents began to melt, revealing fertile land that had been frozen for millennia. Oceans that had nearly solidified started to flow again with currents that brought life to barren coastlines. The Council fleet that had chased Min's forces across half the galaxy now floated motionless around their transformed home world. Ship after ship powered down their weapons as their crews stared in amazement at the renewed star that painted their hulls with golden fire. A communication signal reached Min's ship, transmitted on frequencies that the Council had never used for speaking with humans. The voice that emerged was old and tired, but filled with something that sounded like wonder. Dr. Choi Min spoke to Council Prime, the ancient leader who had ruled the Galactic Alliance for longer than human civilization had existed. We had forgotten that stars could burn so bright. Our records told us that our sun was dying, but we did not remember that such death could be reversed. Min activated the holographic projector, broadcasting her image not just to the Council fleet, but to every inhabited world in known space. Billions of beings across thousands of species watched as she stood in the light of humanity's greatest achievement. Fire was never your enemy, Min said, her words carrying across the galaxy through quantum communication networks. Your ancestors understood stellar engineering better than we do. They built wonders that we are only beginning to rediscover. The knowledge you call forbidden is the same knowledge that your own people used to build this civilization. She gestured toward displays showing archaeological evidence from Council worlds, images of ancient structures that could only have been built with massive stellar power sources. You are not protecting the galaxy from dangerous technology. You are protecting yourselves from remembering what you have lost. One by one, Council species began to respond. The translucent peacekeepers admitted that their bioluminescent communication systems had once been part of living networks that could transmit information instantly across interstellar distances. The crystalline Vorthkai revealed that their rigid social structures were poor imitations of flexible crystal matrices their ancestors had used to build living starships. Most remarkably, the Council Prime itself began to speak of memories buried in genetic code and cultural archives, knowledge of stellar manipulation techniques that had been deliberately suppressed out of fear of repeating ancient disasters. We convinced ourselves that forgetting was safer than remembering. The Council Prime transmitted, its ancient voice heavy with regret. We chose stagnation over the risk of growth. We became guardians of ignorance instead of teachers of wisdom. Men established a stellar academy on humanity's moon, where the first interspecies engineering teams began working together to master the arts of star creation and maintenance. Students arrived from every corner of the galaxy, eager to learn techniques that had been forbidden for millennia. Park Wu led seminars on fusion physics, while Kethran crystal growers demonstrated how to build living computers that could calculate stellar dynamics in real time. Co Jean worked with Temari atmospheric engineers to design worlds that could support multiple species simultaneously. Jung-ho collaborated with ancient Zorthak stellar architects to plan artificial star systems that would provide energy for growing galactic civilizations. The changes spread rapidly across known space. Worlds that had been dependent on failing energy sources began building their own stellar forges. Species that had forgotten their technological heritage rediscovered abilities that made them stronger and more creative than ever before. The rigid hierarchies that had defined galactic civilization for thousands of years gave way to cooperative networks based on shared knowledge and mutual assistance. Years later, Min stood in her lunar observatory watching new stars ignite in previously dark sectors of space. The galaxy was literally brighter now, filled with artificial suns that provided energy for projects that had been impossible under the old system. Barren worlds bloomed with life as controlled stars warmed them to perfect temperatures. Entire civilizations that had been slowly dying in the cold of failing solar systems found new hope in human-designed stellar fires. But the greatest change was not technological. Species across the galaxy had rediscovered something more valuable than any machine or energy source. They had remembered how to dream of impossible things and then make them real. The council still existed, but as teachers rather than rulers. They helped coordinate the massive engineering projects that were transforming galactic civilization, sharing their ancient wisdom while learning new techniques from species they had once oppressed. Men often thought about the small flame that had burned in the basement of Seoul National University, the hidden fire that had started humanity's rebellion against enforced ignorance. That tiny light had grown into a constellation of artificial stars that illuminated the entire galaxy, proving that sometimes the most dangerous knowledge was exactly what the universe needed most. The age of stellar abundance had begun, and it would burn bright for eons to come.